Welcome to the 50th edition of EverybodyHatesCleveland.com, the podcast. I'm pretty sure that I never thought we'd get to the 50th edition of anything podcasting-wise, but here we are. I don't know if this is a special edition. I know we're probably going to go in a different direction than originally intended. The Indians are currently down 3-1 against the Rays. It's Game 5. I still want to punch a hole through the wall, but I digress. We'll get there in a second. I'm joined today by my normal podcast guest host, tag team partner, Mike Hattery. But the big deal today in 50 is we're joined today by Jeff Nomina, who's slowly but surely becoming a regular on this said podcast. I don't know how that happened. We're honored by your presence.
I just weaseled my way on. You guys sign on to do a call, and I'm just already there.
And a guy I've been trying to podcast with for a long time now, the current member. Yesterday I podcast with Paul Cousino, who hasn't been on the interwebs, at least in any visible fashion, in many, many years. But the guy who took over for him, and this is no rip to you, Al, but seemingly on about as much as Paul. No, I'm just kidding. But also joining us today is the current member of the Diatribe, Al Ciammaichella. Al, welcome to the podcast. How are you doing today? That's kind of a loaded question, I know.
I was doing a lot better 10 minutes ago.
Well, we'll get into all the fun of today's game in a second. Let's just get things started off here. My favorite topic, JRam. And as we were briefly talking off air, JRam is playing every day, and we can debate on whether or not that's a good thing or a bad thing at this point. Hot takes can commence. But he has in the outfield, of course, in very limited play. And Mike, you and I talked about this, and now I'll start with you. He's getting thrown out there every day in the same fashion as Mike Aviles, with very limited time in the outfield in real game situations. You can talk about the angle if you want to, and I don't even know if you saw it. The angle he took looked bad. It looked like he could have made the catch, whatever. But again, Mike, kind of following up on our podcast from a couple of days ago, is Tito Francona setting JRam up for failure by throwing him into these positions that he can't succeed in without, I guess, playing time?
I think so. I think hubris kind of fooled the Indians when Chisenhall looked incredibly good in the outfield last year. I think this is a much tougher transition than it's been made out to be, and the Indians gave JRam, a handful of spring training games to try and learn the outfield on the fly, and obviously a few last year in Columbus. But I mean, we're working with like 20 or 30 games of him trying to be a passable major league outfielder, and it's pretty hard to do. So I think it's a pretty bad situation for him. And one that I'm not particularly comfortable with, but thankfully Brantley should be back and Chisenhall should be back in the near term.
Al, you're new to this podcast, and you bring this minor league perspective to it, and I know you've seen JRam in the past as well. What are your thoughts on him as Tampa Bay hits another home run? What are your thoughts on him playing left field, center field, third base, all around the diamond, with really not at all at second base?
I mean, it makes sense. He's a good little athlete. He's not an outfielder, certainly, right now or after the limited experience he's had there, but he can play outfield. He can't play outfield well, but he's kind of being thrust into more of an everyday role because of the injuries. So, I don't even blame Tito necessarily. I think he's the best of some subpar options right now. When they're facing lefties, Tyler Naquin's just not going to play center field, which I get. At this stage in his career, I don't think he's going to go out there and hit major league left-handed pitching with any degree of regularity. So JRam in left field is about as good as we're going to get until Brantley and Chisenhall come back.
All right, Jeff. Here's your chance. I know you're on board.
Jeff is here. Is this a
yeah.
Cavs podcast? Is he going to talk about Dion Waiters?
Can I? Can I talk about Dion Waiters?
He'd be
a hell of a left fielder for us.
There does seem to be a JRam Dion kind of connection. They do kind of fit. They kind of look alike, I guess.
They do kind of look alike. stocky, kind of scrappy guys.
If anybody,
Kind of
if
an attitude.
anybody's, if anybody in the NBA is going to wear a mink coat, it's certainly going to be Dion Waiters. But I digress. Thoughts on JRam early on? I guess Al brought up a good point. The Indians are kind of where they're at right now, and it's easy. It's not really easy to overlook the fact that Columbus right now has 2/3 of our starting outfield. Is this just a scenario where we just got to get through this next week, or is this going to be one of those scenarios, Jeff, where we think when Chisenhall comes back and when Brantley comes back, it's going to limit JRam's kind of maneuverability around the outfield, but in reality, are they going to just find JRam out there all the time anyways? I mean, that's what happened with Aviles last year.
I'm not completely down on him in the outfield. He's still pretty young and he hasn't practiced all that much. I'm more annoyed how much of the spring he spent at third base instead of getting these reps. If this was their plan all along to throw him out there, I wish they would have been giving him a little bit more time to get some of those reps out there. But I do think it'll be interesting when we see Chisenhall come back because they're throwing JRam out against lefties right now, even over Cowgill, which is somewhat surprising. And when Chisenhall comes back and we have Naquin still here, there's going to be some decisions that have to be made there as well every time we play a lefty. So maybe he does keep getting the playing time. I just kind of assume when Brantley came back, when Chisenhall comes back, it's gonna go down quite a bit, and it's going to be kind of the opposite problem where right now we might be relying on him too much, but a month from now I could see it being hard to find spots for him when Kipnis and Brantley are playing every day, and I don't know how much they're really going to want to sit Uribe. He's been making some hard contact and stuff out there. So I think it's kind of a weird situation where right now they have to rely on him a lot, but a month from now it might be kind of hard to find spots for him.
Well, and I guess I'm coming off like I don't like JRam. I do, and it just one of those things where overanalyzing on Twitter. You watch the angle, and of course he's not playing a position he's not familiar with. So, you can point to a lot. It's one game. They're going to be 2-3 after having not played in what seems like forever. So I guess at the end of the day, analyzing one. I think the thing I'm most concerned about is we get a 4-game sample of the offense and think perhaps the offense is taking a turn for the better. And of course, I think the reality of this team right now as it stands, especially without Brantley, is that offensively, I just don't think this team. I mean, I think we've got, as many people have said, I think we're going to win a lot of games 3-2, and unfortunately, Kluber seems to be the guy who historically doesn't get run support. So, speaking of run support, though, I kind of want to shift in another direction and get back on track to where I was going to go with this to start off with. And Al, we've never talked. This is the first time we've ever talked other than typing on a keyboard, and I want to point to you because you like me have kind of had kind of a on the ground kind of following with Francisco Lindor, and I've always taken your opinion on him very highly, and you've had an opportunity to see him at Lynchburg, well, at the time Carolina. Now you've got him at the major league level, and he hits a home run today, and of course his offensive production is that we all know how good defensively he is. How surprised are you by his offense, especially the power production? And do you see, his offensive floor a lot higher than maybe even people who have seen him at an extensive level thought? He seems to have a lot more offense than we thought, and it seems to be carrying over this year.
I mean, I think his floor and his ceiling are both higher than anyone reasonably thought coming up. I mean, part of that was he was a 17, 18-year-old kid playing against 20 to 25-year-olds on his way up the ladder. So, he never looked overmatched with the bat. He never looked like he didn't have a clue out there, but he also never looked like he was going to hit 20 home runs over a full season's worth of games, which is, the pace he was basically on last year. So I think a lot, I obviously follow and I'm friends with a lot of non-Indians scouting types with, Baseball Prospectus and some of those guys on Twitter, and none of them saw this coming either. I think you looked at him and saw a kid who could handle the bat from both sides of plate and play an amazing shortstop, which is a star, whether he hits the way he hit last year or not. But God, the way he hit last year, I mean, that's an MVP candidate if he keeps that up over a full season. So, and I think people were pleasantly surprised. He still struggled last year and still struggles this year, I think, with spin a little bit and has some problems tracking that. But those are problems that can be, fixed with exposure to major league breaking pitches, which he's only going to get playing every day in the major league. So, definitely pleasantly surprised. Hope it keeps up.
Yeah, and Jeff, I think we've all been pleasantly surprised, as Al just mentioned, and Paul and I kind of touched upon this last night. We were talking a little bit about, influence on this team, and, he just almost legged out a single, kind of ran it out, and he seems to play the game right. We talked a lot last year on Twitter, at least, and a lot of articles written about, a lack of leadership on this team. Especially with all these player meetings, it didn't seem to be working. And does Francisco Lindor, to you, fill that void? I mean, he's bringing this offense to the table, but he seems to play the game. And again, this isn't a metric kind of way of taking it, but he seems to play the game with that kind of moxie that you look for. As I mentioned, moxie with JRam. This is a whole different kind of thing. Do you see him as a leader on this team, and could he be the player that kind of takes the Indians to the next level as we progress this year in one of those window years where we should be able to make the playoffs?
Yeah, I listened last night. Paul kind of touched on this, that whole thing last year where the new leadership after Moss and Swisher and Bourne, some of those guys left, had to write a little contract to get guys to follow, and some of that just scares the crap out of me. So I do think that there's a leadership void, and he does seem like the perfect guy to fill it. And Lord knows the last thing I would ever want to do is give Al credit. But for the last years watching him come up, I'm looking at numbers and trying to talk to Al and say, hey, this guy looks awesome. And he constantly said to me, like, no, you don't understand. Like, he's better than that. Like, he's the guy. He's incredible. And seeing him come up and kind of do that, that GIF everybody uses, the Indians used it today, of him getting in Brantley's face last year kind of as a joke after, I forget what Brantley did. And it's stuff like that where you're like, man, this guy is younger than anybody out there, hasn't proven anything, and he's out there already in the best player of the team's face, cracking jokes and having that kind of just pull to be able to pull that off. And I think just through some of the things we heard last year from Bauer and Kitness, some of the stuff we heard after some of the trades, the fact that they had to make that contract, that leadership might actually be a little bit of a problem in that locker room. And man, what good timing for him to come up and try to fill that void.
Yeah, the whole contract thing is it's something I teach elementary school, and I'm not going to say it's something an elementary school kid would come up with, but it pretty much is. I swing over to Mike. We've been talking about Lindor for a long time, and I want to throw this quote. This is a quote Al wrote a long time ago, and it's one that's always stuck with me. And we keep talking about this presence of this thing we can't quite put our finger on with regards to Lindor. He just does everything the right way. But Al had this quote in one of his lazy Sundays. Watching Lindor play defense is a lot like watching home run hitters hitting home runs in pregame, and it's always kind of stuck with me. Mike, as we kind of watch these first games kind of unfold with Lindor, offensively leading the way and maybe kind of finding his footing defensively still, but still finding his way as a young player. Is he the player that that kind of transcends everything else? In the 90s we had a lot of power hitters, but I was always enamored with watching Omar Vizquel playing wall ball in the dugout, and these little things that kind of the great players all do. Lindor seems to fit that mold, Mike, for you, and has he done anything in this early week to change your opinion of that?
I think one of the things that we've really seen is, for me, been really enlightening is, we've seen really strong exit velocity from him pretty consistently. I just love his bat head control. I don't think people really, I think we came in with this conception because of where he was drafted and, that elite defensive tool, that I think we really, had responsible pessimism about how good the bat could be. But the way he sort of adapts to pitches inside when he's hitting left-handed and pulls the ball to right field, and takes the right shots when he gets up in counts, when he's in advantageous counts. His decision making is really strong. So that's always impressive to me. I can't draw much of a conclusion from this early in the year, but I really love the sort of choices he makes in counts with just wonderful bat head control. And I think the power is more real than people think it is. There's this like automatic regression assumption, which isn't wrong, but I think that the power is a little more real because of that bat head control and the contact quality and frequency.
Well, and we talk about contact, and I'm not going to mention Bradley Zimmer. I know, Mike, you're trying to distance yourself from that. No, we had a great podcast talking about Bradley Zimmer and that very thing, and I think Lindor is the exact opposite of that. He puts the bat on the ball, which is a great thing. So I think we all agree he's going to be a leader of this team. We'll see how far that carries them. But
the power potential's always been there too. I mean, he in pre-draft workouts at one of those like area code games, he went out with a wood bat and won the home run derby prior to the All-Star game.
Yeah,
is a scrawny 17-year-old high school kid. So it's not like he can't swing for power. The power potential's never been there. He's strong. He just never really. That wasn't an area of his game that he brought to the forefront, but I definitely think he can.
Well, and I think as he, and I think we've all mentioned it in one form or another, I think as he gets bigger, as he will do likely over his next couple of years, I think that power will just start to showcase itself with that bat head control that Mike was talking about. All right, so we've got some moves coming up here. We know Brantley's coming up soon. We know Chisenhall's coming up soon. I'll go one at a time. I'll start with you, Jeff. Both of these guys are coming up. Who do you think is going to get sent down in the wake of Brantley coming up and Chisenhall coming up?
I think for sure Cowgill's gone. I mean, the fact that he's not even playing against lefties at this point is pretty, big sign of what's coming for his way. The other one that wouldn't shock me would be Bird. I read something, and I hope this is correct, but the internet said it, so it has to be, that his contract incentive, so I think he had like a $1 million base and then $2.5 million in incentives, is if he's on the roster at a certain point within 45 days, somewhere within that window of opening day. And it wouldn't surprise me if they see Chisenhall and Brantley come up. They've got Naquin, if they're comfortable at all with Ramirez out there. If they let Bird go, I don't know. I like Bird on this team. I wish they could keep him, but he seems like a kind of obvious choice as the guy that would go down. I know some people speculate Naquin, but I just don't understand who plays center field if we do that. That means Rajai Davis is playing every day. If we don't think Jose Ramirez can even play left field, they're not going to slide him over to center. So to me, I could see Bird maybe being the guy that goes, just kind of on a money crunch.
Well, I think the thing you mentioned there, the worry for me, though, is they're thinking Brantley in center field, and I don't know a guy with health issues if you want him playing center field, a position that we already questioned. No. Yeah. All right, Mike, what are the two calls for you?
Yeah, I think it's the same. I think the really interesting thing, too, is when you throw Tommy Hunter into the mix. I don't know if we've discussed that, but I think we're going to have Tommy Hunter in about a month. I would bet it's Otero who's going to get bumped for him, but I think Nomina, I've talked about this a bunch, and I have the same sort of conclusion. I doubt they go without Naquin. They have to have a guy who can play regular center other than Davis at this point, and you can't do that with Brantley with the injury issues so far, and you need to protect his body this year. So I would say, you have to go Bird and Cowgill.
All right, Al, you going in a different direction here?
I think they're going to keep Bird. I think it'll be Cowgill and an arm. I don't think they're going to carry. Even Terry Francona doesn't need 75 right-handed relievers or however many right now.
Challenge accepted. He's going to listen to this podcast.
Yeah,
oh, yeah.
Yeah. Honestly, I can't believe they haven't brought up the ambidextrous guy yet. Last year, but I thought Tito was just going to bring him straight to the club.
Well, I mean, are you guys worried about Francona moves this year? I mean, yes. I don't. Well, I wasn't going to start with you, Jeff, but I guess that's the way we're going to go here. I like Terry Francona. I think everybody knows that. I just, as I listen to my boy Mike over here and started really paying attention to some of the moves. I mean, obviously there's questionable moves, and how many wins is one? Okay, I guess we should probably take this in levels. Are you guys worried about Francona 1? And does he cost us wins or does he gain us wins? I guess that's the question. Jeff, we've already got the yes from you. Just keep on going.
Yeah, in terms of cost or gain us wins, it's hard to tell because I think any of the benefit he's bringing is stuff behind the scenes that we can't really quantify, and the stuff that he seems to struggle with a little bit is stuff that's much easier to look at and put in Mike Aviles in center field and weep into your hands and stuff. So it's one of those. It's hard to say to quantify it at all. Listen, the guy has won World Series. He's been around baseball forever. I'm sure he knows what he's doing, but he makes just ridiculously insane decisions sometimes that are really frustrating, and that's hard to stomach. But in my opinion, he's here for the long haul. I don't know that anybody in that front office kind of has the authority to fire Tito Francona. So it's just I'm just kind of accepting that anything he does that's crazy is just part of the package.
What are your thoughts, Alan? And I go back and forth with this all the time. I get angry when people rip on him, and then he makes a move, and it makes me hard to kind of defend him. But what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, he probably doesn't do everything the way you would expect it to be done. I mean, he makes moves that have you scratch your head every once in a while, but he's making those moves in the dugout without the benefit of hindsight or even time to think, because he's got a million other things going on at the time. I definitely think he's a net gain for the Indians. Like, I don't know who else they would have in the dugout. I mean, he's no worse than Manny Acta in general. I mean, and Manny Acta was one of the nicest guys in baseball, but he just wasn't the right manager. I mean, the players love him. They love playing for him. They do everything he asks and more. He's good, like Jeff said, with the behind-the-scenes stuff, even when you're a little bit confused about his reliever usage or why, Aviles or somebody's playing center field. A lot of the times these guys are playing out of position because they have to, because there's no other options, like we said with Ramirez tonight. So, yeah, I like Tito. I mean, how can you not like Tito? He's Tito.
This is a good segue. This is a good segue to you, Mike. Could you answer that question?
I guess the player side thing, I trust people who are well connected, and he gets good reviews. I guess when you publicly have a bunch of players making a contract, when Kipnis comments on spring training and notes how much more professional it is the next season, I guess I have some concerns in terms of him sort of requiring a level of professionalism in the clubhouse when we have these sort of questions. I think he probably does a great job in the clubhouse, and it's something that I really don't deserve to comment on. But those things that are publicly released kind of concern me, that they're even discussed publicly, even if they're occurring. So strategically, I think we're starting Jose Ramirez all the time in left field because we have an 8-man bullpen when we're starting 4 guys because we don't even need 5 starters right now. So I guess I have some concerns in terms of we really have an awkward roster, and it's partially because of how Francona likes to use guys, except he only relies on 3 relievers really, but he carries 8 of them. So that's a pretty big problem.
Is going to be your next outfielder instead of one of those pitchers that prevents Ramirez from playing left field right now,
Yeah.
I agree that when Brantley and Chisenhall are back, they should drop an arm and let somebody else play outfield. But right now, I just don't see it.
That's fair. I think what is Robbie Grossman versus Dan Otero? I mean, I don't really know, but does it allow you to play with matchups a little more and maybe flip a guy into left field late in the game who's more competent defensively? I think it might. So I get that. I just think the 8-man pen this early with, when you don't even need 5 starters and you can maybe just get a guy who has a platoon split advantage to pair with Ramirez and more experience in left probably gives you a little bit of an advantage, especially with Bird's defense looking pretty iffy at this point. And Davis certainly isn't fleet in center. So I'd like to see someone who actually is a really solid defender they could plug in. and I think that'd be a better bench spot than a useless bullpen arm. But I get that.
Well, I think the thing to consider too is, and Mike, you hit upon this yesterday when we were talking. We were talking about kind of, literally, 3 weeks before the season started, our starting outfield was Almonte, Chisenhall, and while it might not have been Brantley, I think they might have been eyeballing. Brantley was playing games. I think they were eyeballing him as starting opening day. And then literally the week before the season starts, Brantley, gets shut down, Chisenhall gets put on the DL, and Almonte's gone, and all of a sudden, they're making kind of these snap moves where, you're bringing up a Cowgill, you're bringing up a Naquin, maybe you weren't counting on him. Maybe, as Al maybe hit the nail on the head, it may just be a factor of, this is just kind of where we're at, and Mike, you touched upon it yesterday too. I don't know. I just want to get through. I think the key here is Brantley getting back up to this team. I mean, how... we're 2-3 right now. I mean, the team has looked, a great game today by Corey Kluber. Is there anything that you're taking into account what's going to change in the next week or 10 days, with these guys coming back? Is there anything that you've seen today over the past week, aside from weather, that you're worried about, that maybe stands out to you as something that may not be fitting with this team right now? Mike, I'll start with you.
In terms of roster,
anything.
I don't know. I don't have a really good answer for that question. I should punt and listen to smarter people, and I'll come back.
What about you, Al? Yeah.
I was gonna say, if you go straight to Jeff, I'm hanging up.
I want to hear Al's answer. I'm just gonna copy that.
I mean, my simple answer is it's 5 games without their best offensive player. So no. I mean, there's nothing that's happened yet that's worth panicking over. If Kluber had come out twice and gotten shelled, or no, I can't honestly think, short of severe injuries or anything, something that would be worth panicking over after 5 games.
I feel like I have to have a hot take just to offset Al's boring answer.
Yeah,
I feel like
Jeff is going to be panicking. If you saw the text message I got from Jeff during the opener,
I was probably drunk. In my defense,
is the season over? Is the season over right now?
I was probably drunker than I am now. That's how I should word that. In terms of anything scaring, I wouldn't say I'm scared of anything yet, but I guess one of the things that could scare me is the defense hasn't looked great, and that's something that we thought was going to be like this huge weapon where we were going to be one of the best defensive, teams. And if that doesn't pan out, that's not great. It's been 1 or 2 outings, but Shaw kind of imploding after his usage the last few years. Kind of scary if the bullpen doesn't come through, and needing that rotation to be hugely elite, and if they're just really, really, really good instead, that's a kind of scary thing. And Kluber was great for most of the night for that home run. So I'm not freaking out over what's happening yet, but we definitely need some things to go right, and I hope that they start going right soon.
Well, you know what though, Jeff, we're 2-3, and I think in April that's awesome for the Indians. So
it's like the best record we've had since like 2011 or 12.
I know. That kind of says it all. All right, give me one thing that stands out to you on the plus side. I'm starting with this one because I can't say enough, and I hope I'm not stealing Al's thunder here because he might go this direction too. Yan Gomes looks fantastic. I mean, there's nothing about the guy that I just everything about him right now looks great. I mean, he's had a couple of off throws tonight that were kind of on the inside of the bag, but they were cannons. I mean, he still almost picked the guys off. So let's go ahead and start with you, Al. If you want to say anything about Gomes, go ahead. And what are the pluses that you've seen so far?
I mean, him being healthy, and it's one of the things I talked about in Lazy Sunday a couple weeks ago. Him being healthy is one of the biggest keys to this season, almost even more so than Brantley, because he's right-handed, which everybody knows we need a right-handed power bat, which he is. He affects the game defensively more than Brantley or more than anyone other than maybe Lindor, because he catches, and that's, not only the most important position on the field, but handling the pitching staff and controlling the running game and everything like that. And having him be able to hit too. He is the most important player on the 2016 Indians. With all due respect to Francisco Lindor and his greatness and how adorable he is, but Gomes is the most important player on the team, and having him back healthy and swing the bat is, can't be overstated, I don't think.
Adorable. That's great. That might be the name of the podcast right there. All right, Mike, the big plus for you.
Gomes is obviously the big plus, but that's already been discussed. I think the big plus for me, really quality. Napoli has looked really, really good, and you don't want to overreact to anything in the small sample department. But contact quality has looked great. Each of these guys, Davis and Uribe, are making a lot of hard contact too. Although Davis is whiffing at a rate that is unbelievable. Really shouldn't be at the top of the lineup, but that's just another thing that doesn't matter that much, I suppose. But those things, those have been positive to me. Just two of those guys need to be healthy and sort of match their previous production. And Napoli is a real sort of upside cog that can do that. And him looking healthy has been huge. So, we'll cross our fingers the rest of the season that he can play 120 games. But that's been really positive to me.
Jeff?
Well, Mike stole mine, so I'm kind of pissed, but we'll address that later. I would say I'm pretty excited. Napoli scared me coming into the year. He was so bad against right-handed pitching last year that him as an everyday guy scared me. But, man, him and Santana next to each other looks great. And with Gomes behind them, that looks like a real weapon. So the top of our lineup and then kind of the middle of our lineup both look like weapons, which I don't know that we thought, assuming when Brantley comes back. And I don't know that we thought that was going to be the case. So I still hope that they do give Napoli some days off and don't rely on him a little too much, but that's been a real plus. I'm really excited about seeing what we can do kind of after the top of the order and getting some actual production from the rest of the lineup, which is something that just didn't happen at all last year.
All right, so I don't want to keep everybody too late. I know we're sitting right about the 35-minute mark. I do want to talk about one thing here before we go, and throughout all this, feel free to bash on each other all you want, but a lot of brief mentions about the lineup, and we've seen a lot of different lineups, and we talked about Rajai Davis batting leading off, maybe not the best thing. We've seen Lindor leading off. Kipnis has been hitting second, can also lead off. We've seen Lindor hit third. We've seen a lot of variations. Obviously, some of that's because of Brantley not being there. How do you see this lineup shaking out with Brantley coming back, with Chisenhall coming back? Where ultimately do you see these guys? Is Kipnis eventually going to move back into the leadoff role? Is Lindor going to take the leadoff role? Where do you eventually see things shaking up? Mike, let's start with you.
Yeah, I think Tito's going to use Lindor as his classic sort of lefty splitter, so I think we'll probably move back to the Kip in the one hole. Lindor will split Kipnis and Brantley, so we'll have Lindor, Kipnis, Brantley, and then I'd see Napoli as your righty. You go left, you go switch with Santana, right with Gomes, and then you just mix and match at the bottom of the order with Uribe, Ramirez, Chisenhall. Basically, you go platoon splits with those bottom three. And truthfully, I'd like to see them do something platoon splits-wise with Kipnis, but that'll never happen because he's too important to the team. But he really can't hit left-handed pitching, which is a little bit of a problem.
Jeff, Al, jump in.
The whole thing with Kipnis, Kipnis hitting the two-spot versus left-hand pitching is very confusing to me because it's like an admission that you don't think he should hit third or lead off, but he's still in the top. I guess I don't understand the logic behind it, but I wouldn't hate seeing Lindor kind of claim that leadoff spot. That seems like kind of a good spot for him as a switch hitter. You can leave him in every day and not have to worry about it. So I wouldn't hate seeing that, but I think they'll mix and match and find it okay. I'm not too worried about the lineup. There's enough talent for once that I think that they can scratch out a decent amount of runs.
What do you think, Al? To me, Napoli, and you mentioned Gomes, really lengthen the lineup. When you put Brantley in, I think we have a legit, our top six batters have a lot of interesting intangibles, and as Mike pointed out, we can go righty-lefty pretty well. Is that the lineup that you see? Do you see any changes from what Mike said?
No, I think Mike pretty much hit it. I think if Kip leads off against righties, then you have Lindor hitting second and Brantley hitting third, and then you can pretty much go lefty righty with switch hitters matched in there. Mike and I were tweeting back and forth about it today. That's it's a really solid top six, and then you fill out the bottom three with good defenders with Naquin in center, Chisenhall, Jeff's favorite player, in right, and basically Uribe or Urshela at some point this year, I'm sure, at third. So yeah, that top six is solid. It's deep. They're going to see a lot of pitches. They're going to wear a lot of starters out and get into a lot of bullpens by the fifth and sixth inning.
All right. So you mentioned Chisenhall. So there's rumors that he's going to be in Akron. Brantley's going to be in Akron. Zimmer's down there. Frazier's down there. I mean, we all agree that he's the fourth best outfielder, right, in the Akron lineup?
I mean, defensively or overall?
Overall.
He's probably a better defender than Frazier, but Zimmer is a better defender than he is. Yeah, I like him partially because he infuriates Jeff. That's one of my favorite qualities about him.
That's what Lonnie and Al have in common.
Yeah.
That and horrible mustaches.
I had that mustache.
Well, I guess that's as good a place as any to leave it. We'll wrap things up there. I always like to give everybody a last take. I'll start with you, Jeff. I hope Al doesn't hang up before we go, but any final thoughts?
No, it's 2 and 3. It's 5 games. It doesn't matter. But there's a lot of talk about getting out to a hot start, and so it's a little frustrating they're not. But hey, losing all these games to rain delays and postponements when Brantley's out and Puppenhall's out is not the worst thing that's ever happened. So, let's hope that they start going on a tear here and use this upcoming. We have a couple decent series coming up, right? Tampa and Philly and a couple others. So let's hope they can get a decent start here and not have to play catch up the rest of the year.
All right, Al.
I mean, if they're 500 when Brantley comes back, I think I'd be happy. And when they can put the lineup that Tito envisioned onto the lineup card every day, and the defense that he envisioned on the field every day, and let the chips fall where they may. I mean, I think the starting rotation is good enough. I think the bullpen is scary, but they're not going to have to throw as many innings. And I hate Jeff. He's a terrible person. Which is a shame because his wife and child are wonderful, beautiful people.
I have to offset them.
And
it's all about balance.
He's just really, really bad. I mean, anybody who follows him on Twitter knows he's awful.
I don't really dispute this. I'm a pretty terrible person.
It's always
but I work hard at it. I work very hard at it. Specifically annoying Al, which I find myself very good at.
Well, I guess, Mike, you got to follow all that.
I'll pass my time along. I'm close.
All right, we'll wrap things up there. It's good to have you guys actually on after all this time trying to get you guys on. Like to get you on a little more regular. With that said, make sure you check out the podcast. We podcast way too much. 2 more coming up in the next couple of days. So make sure you tune into our podcast and make sure you follow Al on Twitter. Make sure you follow his site at thediatribe.com. And, of course, you can follow Jeff, Mike, and I for whatever reason at Everybody Hates Cleveland because we post irregularly and usually rip on somebody that you like. So have fun with that. With that said, go Tribe.